Welcome, Lightseekers, to another journey into the mystical and the mysterious. In a world where the unseen often influences the seen, there are those among us who carry ancient powers, gifts that connect them deeply to the rhythms of nature, the cycles of the moon, and the energy that flows through all things. These individuals are natural-born witches, possessors of abilities that have been passed down through generations, sometimes lying dormant until the right moment. But how do you know if you're one of these rare souls? How can you recognize the signs that you are a natural-born witch? Today, we're not just exploring these signs, we're diving deep into their meanings, histories, and the profound impact they can have on your life. By the end of this journey, you may discover aspects of yourself that you've always felt but never fully understood. So, settle in, open your mind, and let's begin. Sign 1, an unbreakable bond with nature. Nature is the foundation of all magic. For natural-born witches, this connection goes far beyond admiration or respect. It is an intrinsic bond, as if the very elements of earth, water, fire, and air are part of their soul's essence. This sign manifests in various ways, from a deep love of gardening to feeling most alive when surrounded by wilderness. In ancient cultures, witches were often seen as guardians of the earth. They were the herbalists, the midwives, and the shamans, people who understood the natural world better than anyone else. This connection was not just practical, it was spiritual. They believed that every plant, stone, and animal had its spirit, its unique energy, which could be harnessed for healing and protection. Take, for example, the story of Morgana, a modern witch from the Pacific Northwest. Since childhood, Morgana felt an inexplicable draw to the forests near her home. While other children played with toys, she would wander through the trees, collecting leaves, stones, and feathers. To her, these were not just objects, they were gifts from the forest, each with its purpose and power. As she grew older, Morgana realized that this connection was more than a love of nature, it was an innate part of who she was, a calling to protect and work with the natural world. Today, many natural-born witches find themselves drawn to environmental causes, feeling a deep responsibility to protect the earth. Whether through activism, sustainable living, or working with natural elements in their magical practices, this sign is a powerful indicator of one's witchy nature. Sign 2, an inner knowing. Have you ever just known something without being told? Perhaps you've had a gut feeling that something was about to happen, and it did. This inner knowing, often called intuition, is a hallmark of a natural-born witch. It's as if the universe whispers its secrets directly into your mind, guiding you through life with an unseen hand. Intuition is more than just a hunch, it's a profound connection to the energies around you. For natural-born witches, this intuition can manifest in various ways: predictive dreams, sudden insights, or an uncanny ability to sense danger before it occurs. This is not just a random occurrence, it's a skill that has been honed over lifetimes, passed down through ancestral lines. Interestingly, modern science has begun to explore the concept of intuition, recognizing it as a real phenomenon. Studies have shown that the brain can process information on a subconscious level, leading to what we perceive as intuitive insights. For witches, this scientific validation only confirms what they have always known, that there is more to the world than meets the eye. Sign 3, a magnet for animals. Animals have a unique sense of energy, they can perceive things that humans often overlook. If you've noticed that animals are drawn to you, even those that are usually shy or aggressive, this could be a sign of your natural witchy abilities. Witches have always been known for their affinity with animals, seeing them as both companions and spiritual guides. In many traditions, witches are believed to have animal familiars, creatures that assist them in their magical workings. These familiars are not just pets, they are spiritual beings that share a deep bond with the witch. Cats, for instance, are often associated with witches due to their mysterious nature and independent spirit. However, any animal can serve as a familiar, depending on the witch's connection with it. In today's world, this connection might manifest as a strong bond with a pet or an ability to communicate with animals on a deeper level. Some natural-born witches find that animals trust them instinctively, coming to them for comfort or healing. Others may find that they can understand animals in ways that others cannot, picking up on their emotions and needs with ease. Throughout history, witches have used dreams as a tool for divination and self-discovery. In many cultures, it is believed that dreams can reveal hidden truths and provide guidance on important decisions. For natural-born witches, these dreams are often vivid and intense, leaving a lasting impression that lingers long after waking. To truly harness the power of your dreams, it's important to pay attention to the symbols and themes that recur. Keeping a dream journal can be a valuable tool, allowing you to track patterns and uncover the deeper meanings behind your nocturnal visions. You may find that certain animals, people, or places appear frequently in your dreams, each carrying its unique message. In modern witchcraft, dreams are often used in conjunction with other forms of divination, such as tarot or crystal scrying. Some witches even practice lucid dreaming, a technique that allows them to take control of their dreams and explore the spiritual realm more consciously. If you find yourself having strange, vivid dreams that seem to carry a deeper meaning, this could be a sign that your witchy powers are at work. Sign 5. A strong connection to the moon. The moon has long been a symbol of mystery and magic, its phases influencing everything from the tides to human emotions. For natural-born witches, the connection to the moon is particularly strong, as they draw power from its cycles to enhance their magical practices. In many witchcraft traditions, the moon is revered as a powerful deity, representing the divine feminine and the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. Each phase of the moon holds its significance. The waxing moon is a time for growth and manifestation, the full moon for power and clarity, the waning moon for release and banishing, and the new moon for new beginnings and introspection. For natural-born witches, the connection to the moon isn't merely symbolic, it's a vital source of energy and inspiration. You may find that your moods and energy levels fluctuate with the moon's phases, feeling particularly energized during the full moon or introspective during the new moon. This lunar connection is deeply ingrained in your soul, a reminder of the ancient practices that witches have followed for millennia. Throughout history, witches have performed rituals under the light of the full moon, believing that its energy amplifies their magic. The moon's influence was seen as so powerful that many ancient civilizations structured their calendars and religious festivals around its cycles. In these societies, those who could harness the moon's energy were often revered as powerful figures, shamans, priestesses, and wise women who held the key to the mysteries of life and death. In today's world, many witches continue to honor the moon's cycles in their spiritual practices. Some perform full moon rituals to charge crystals, set intentions, or release negative energy. Others might observe the new moon with quiet reflection, using this time to plan for the month ahead or begin new projects. If you feel a strong connection to the moon, it's likely that you're tapping into this ancient tradition, drawing on the moon's power to enhance your own. Sign 6. Sensitivity to energy. Do you often sense the emotions of others before they've spoken a word? Are you acutely aware of the atmosphere in a room, feeling the vibrations of the space even before stepping inside? This heightened sensitivity to energy is a powerful trait of natural-born witches, who are often described as empaths, individuals with the ability to feel and absorb the energies around them. Being sensitive to energy means that you can pick up on subtle shifts in the environment, whether it's the emotional state of a person, the aura of a place, or even the unseen presence of spirits. This ability can be both a blessing and a curse. While it allows you to navigate social situations with ease and offer comfort to those in need, it can also leave you feeling drained or overwhelmed, particularly in chaotic or negative environments. In ancient times, those with this gift were often sought after as healers and counselors, revered for their ability to sense and manipulate the energies around them. They could soothe troubled souls, cleanse spaces of negative energy, and even communicate with the spirits of the dead. Today, this sensitivity remains a core aspect of many witches' practices, allowing them to work with energy in ways that others cannot. If you find that you're easily affected by the energy of people and places, it's important to develop strategies for protecting your own energy. Grounding techniques, such as walking barefoot on the earth or meditating with crystals, can help you stay centered and shielded from negative influences. Additionally, you might consider working with energy tools like sage, incense, or sound healing to cleanse your space and maintain your energetic boundaries. Sign 7. Attraction to the occult. Have you always been fascinated by the mysterious and the unknown? Do books on witchcraft, tarot cards, crystals, and astrology seem to call out to you? This deep attraction to the occult is another sign that you may be a natural-born witch, drawn to the ancient wisdom and practices that have been passed down through generations. The term occult often carries a negative connotation, but in reality, it simply refers to knowledge that is hidden or esoteric, wisdom that is not easily accessible to the masses. For witches, the occult is a treasure trove of spiritual tools and teachings, offering a pathway to understanding the deeper mysteries of the universe. Whether through divination, spellwork, or ritual, the occult provides a framework for exploring your inner power and connecting with the forces of nature. Throughout history, witches have been the keepers of this hidden knowledge, passing down their practices through secret societies, covens, and oral traditions. In times of persecution, these teachings were often disguised or encoded to protect them from being lost. Today, the resurgence of interest in witchcraft and the occult is a testament to the enduring power of these ancient traditions. In modern times, the occult has become more accessible than ever, with countless resources available for those who feel called to explore its mysteries. From online courses to local covens, there are many ways to deepen your understanding of witchcraft and integrate occult practices into your daily life. If you feel a strong pull toward these teachings, it's likely that you're reconnecting with an ancient part of yourself, a part that has always been drawn to the mysteries of the unseen. Sign 8. Healing abilities. Do people often come to you for comfort or advice, feeling better after talking to you? Do you have a natural talent for easing physical or emotional pain? If so, you may have the gift of healing, a powerful sign of being a natural-born witch. Healing is a central aspect of witchcraft, rooted in the belief that all living things are interconnected by a web of energy. Witches have long been known as healers, using herbs, crystals, energy work, and their own innate abilities to bring balance and well-being to those in need. This gift can manifest in many forms, whether through physical healing, emotional support, or spiritual guidance. Natural-born witches often find that they have a unique ability to help others on their path to recovery. In ancient times, witches were often the village healers, revered for their knowledge of herbal remedies and their ability to channel healing energy. They were the midwives, the herbalists, and the wise women who cared for the sick and the wounded. This role was both respected and feared, as the power to heal was also seen as the power to harm. In the modern world, healing can take many forms, from traditional medicine to energy work and holistic therapies. If you feel a calling to heal, it's important to explore the different modalities that resonate with you, whether it's Reiki, crystal healing, or herbalism. Remember that healing is not just about curing illness, it's about bringing harmony to the mind, body, and spirit. Sign 9. Unexplained phenomena. Have lights flickered when you were angry, or objects moved without explanation? Do you experience strange phenomena that others might dismiss as coincidences? This is one of the most mysterious signs of being a natural-born witch. Your energy is so strong that it can affect the physical world in ways that seem almost supernatural. For natural-born witches, these occurrences are often more than just random events. They are manifestations of your inner power, a reminder that you are connected to forces beyond the ordinary. This might include poltergeist activity, sudden changes in weather, or even technology behaving strangely around you. While these phenomena can be unsettling, they are also a sign that your energy is potent and needs to be directed with intention. Throughout history, such phenomena have been recorded in connection with individuals believed to possess magical abilities. Stories of witches influencing the weather, summoning spirits, or affecting the environment around them are common in folklore. These tales, though sometimes exaggerated, stem from a deep-seated belief in the power of certain individuals to transcend the ordinary limitations of the physical world. In today's world, It's important for natural-born witches to understand and control their energy, especially when it begins to manifest in physical ways. Techniques such as grounding, centering, and shielding can help you manage your power, ensuring that it is used for positive and constructive purposes. If you experience unexplained phenomena, consider it an opportunity to deepen your practice and explore the full extent of your abilities. Sign 10. A deep sense of purpose. Above all, natural-born witches possess a profound sense of purpose, a feeling that they are here to fulfill a mission, to bring healing, wisdom, or change to the world. This sense of purpose is not always clear or easy to define, but it is a constant presence, guiding you on your path and motivating you to explore your true potential. This inner drive often manifests as a deep curiosity about the world, a desire to learn, grow, and make a difference. You may feel a strong connection to social justice, environmental issues, or spiritual development, drawn to causes that align with your soul's mission. For natural-born witches, this sense of purpose is a guiding light, helping you navigate life's challenges and stay true to your calling. Throughout history, witches have often been seen as agents of change, challenging the status quo and advocating for the marginalized. Whether as healers, midwives, or spiritual leaders, they have played vital roles in their communities, using their gifts to bring about positive transformation. This sense of purpose is not just a personal drive, it is a reflection of the witch's role as a guardian of wisdom and a catalyst for change. If you feel a strong sense of purpose, it's important to honor it and explore how you can use your gifts to make a difference. Whether through activism, education, or personal growth, your purpose is a key part of your identity as a natural-born witch. Trust in this inner calling, and let it guide you toward fulfilling your true potential. Embrace your inner witch. As we conclude this journey through the 10 signs of a natural-born witch, remember that these signs are just the beginning. Your path as a witch is unique, shaped by your experiences, beliefs, and the energy you bring to the world. Embrace these signs as a part of who you are, and know that you are not alone. Many others share this journey with you, connected by a shared heritage of magic, mystery, and power. Whether you resonate with all of these signs or just a few, the most important thing is to trust your intuition and follow your path with confidence. The world needs witches, those who can see beyond the ordinary, who can heal, protect, and transform. Your journey as a natural-born witch is a gift, a reminder that you are here to make a difference. So, as you step forward into your future, remember the power that lies within you. Trust in your abilities, honor your heritage, and know that you are a part of something ancient and powerful. The magic is within you, now, let it shine.